Wendy's expression couldn't help but feel a little sad. Although at first she was disgusted with her parents' and grandmother's arrangement to serve Fredman, but after thinking about it carefully, Fredman treated herself well back then. After all, it only happened once with her, and he was able to invest tens of millions and give her $5 million pocket money. Thinking of this, Wendy couldn't help but sigh inwardly. If Fredman still has the abilities of a man, then she should follow him now, and she should be a fragrant drinker, and she won't have such a miserable life? Just thinking about it, the two Rolls-Royce drove one after the other towards the airport expressway, rushing to the airport quickly. Old Mrs. Wilson and Wendy were even more surprised in their hearts. They were really going to the airport. What are they going to do? Although she was puzzled in her heart, Mrs. Wilson knew very well that it would be useless to think too much at this time, because she was already in someone else's car, so it's better to settle down and wait to see what arrangements the other party has. Moreover, her instinct tells her that although the other party looks mysterious, it shouldn't hurt her. Because she is poor now and has nothing to do. If others want to harm her, she won't have to spend so much trouble. Thinking of this, the old Mrs. Wilson was also relieved. So he simply sat in the car calmly, waiting to see what medicine the other party was selling. Two Rolls-Royce drove directly into Orus Hill Airport. In a small hangar at the airport, Wu's Gulfstream aircraft had already parked here. It was this plane that took Horaya to Suzhou last night. Early this morning, the plane took off again from Suzhou to Orus Hill, ready to pick up the Wilson family. Seeing a private jet parked in front of her, Mrs. Wilson was so surprised that she couldn't speak. If Rolls-Royce is the toy of the rich, then private jets can only be afforded by the rich of the rich. Because Gulfstream aircraft like this sells for at least RMB 200 million to RMB 300 million. And if you buy an aircraft like this, you don't need to spend only 2 to 300 million. You have to hire a crew, including 2 pilots, several mechanics, and several service personnel. Aircraft maintenance costs are also very high. Parking in the hangar, and taking off and landing at the airport cost a lot of money. It is equivalent to buying a private jet, which means buying a tool to burn money. When the Lady Wilson saw this private jet, she immediately realized that there must be a very powerful family behind it. Rolls-Royce stopped beside the plane, and the old Mrs. Wilson walked down with her granddaughter Wendy. Wendy was also staring at this private plane, when a familiar figure suddenly ran out of the plane door. "Grandma! Wendy!" When the two heard this voice, they looked up, and it was Harold who got out of the plane. Old Mrs. Wilson saw her grandson and said excitedly, "Harold, why are you here? Where is your father? Mom?" As soon as Mrs. Wilson finished speaking, her eldest son Noah also walked out of the plane. Old Mrs. Wilson was very excited, but seeing her son and grandson lose a lot of weight, she couldn't help but feel distressed. The old Mrs. Wilson didn't care about these things. She only cared about herself and didn't care about anything else. But after going through jail, and seeing her son and grandson, she also felt a feeling that blood was thicker than water. And looking at eldest son, there are a lot of white hair coming out, and the whole person is also several years old. He was originally ruddy and blessed, but now his skin is dull and his body is thin, which really makes the Lady Wilson feel distressed. On the contrary, in these days in jail, Mrs. Wilson didn't suffer any crime, and she abused Elaine for a few days, so she didn't seem to lose weight or age. At this time, Harold and Noah both ran up to the Lady Wilson, who cried bitterly while hugging her son and grandson. She cried in her mouth and muttered, "My son, my grandson, you too have suffered." Harold was aggrieved like a child, wiped his eyes and choked with tears. "Grandma, you don't know what kind of hardships my dad and I have had during this period of time. This is the hardship I have never had in my life. Eat it all." Noah also sighed and said, "Hey, it's all the same, so don't talk about those things, it will only increase your troubles." Old Mrs. Wilson nodded, and hurriedly asked, "By the way, Noah, what the HLL is going on? Who is the one who released us on bail?" "I don't know." Noah shook his head and said, "I and Harold were also taken out suddenly, and then their car sent us here and let us wait here. Neither know who they are." At this time, the man who picked up Mrs. Wilson and Wendy from the detention center quickly walked up to a family of 4 and said, "Introduce myself. My name is Dawson Wu. I belong to the Wu family. My brother is called Regnar. You should have heard of it." Wu family? The 4 members of the Wilson family were stunned. How could they not know the Wu family? The Wu family is the #1 family in the south of the Yangtze River, much better than the Song family. When the old master of the Wu family was in the limelight, his legend circulated throughout Orus Hill. At that time, the old master Wilson always talked about the old master of the Wu family every day, and regarded him as an idol worthy of imitation efforts. The Wilson family never dreamed that they could have a relationship with the Wu family, and this time it was the Wu family which rescued them. This is really amazing. Does the Wilson family need time to run?